A young black reporter in a cheap suit quietly arrives to cover a glamorous society wedding. The bride mocks him in front of hundreds of guests, calling him a nobody and telling security to throw him out. What no one knows is that this nobody is the son of a billionaire media mogul and the CEO-in-waiting of the network covering the event. Within 48 hours, the video goes viral, the bride's life collapses, and the world learns the truth. Before we find out what happens next, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story already has you hooked, hit that like button, because this is just getting started. The air at the Lancaster estate was thick with the scent of money. It smelled of imported roses, their petals perfectly unblemished, and the crisp, sweet fizz of $1,000 champagne. Marble statues, copies of ancient Greek gods, stood silent watch over a courtyard teeming with society's finest. Men in tailored tuxedos laughed with practiced ease, while women in shimmering gowns moved like swans on a placid lake. Cameras flashed, capturing manufactured smiles and the cold glitter of diamonds. It was a perfect picture of wealth and power, a meticulously crafted illusion of flawlessness. And then the illusion shattered. In the center of it all stood Tiffany Lancaster, the bride, a vision in white silk and lace. But the expression on her face was anything but angelic. Her perfectly painted lips were twisted into a sneer. Her eyes, cold and hard, were fixed on a young black man standing quietly near the fountain. His name was Marcus Hale. He wore a simple dark suit that, while clean and pressed, looked inexpensive next to the bespoke creations surrounding him. He held a small professional camera and a press badge that hung from a simple lanyard around his neck. He had just taken a single discreet photo of the floral arrangements and was about to move on when Tiffany spotted him. "Excuse me," she had called out, her voice not questioning but accusing. The chatter around them quieted. All eyes turned. Marcus had approached politely. "Marcus Hale, Hale News," he said, his voice calm and even. He presented his badge. "I'm here to cover the event for the society pages, ma'am." Tiffany looked at the badge, then back at his face, and a slow, cruel smile spread across her lips. It was a smile of dismissal, of utter contempt. She let out a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't a sound of amusement, it was a weapon. "Hale News?" she repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she turned to her circle of bridesmaids. They giggled on cue, their laughter like the tinkling of ice in a glass. "Honey, Hale News sends their top photographers to our events. They don't send this." She gestured vaguely at Marcus, a flick of her wrist that encompassed his suit, his face, his very existence. The crowd, sensing drama, began to close in. Phones, like metallic insects, emerged from pockets and purses, their lenses aimed and ready. "Who let the janitor in here?" Tiffany's voice sliced through the courtyard, loud and clear for everyone to hear. A wave of shocked, then delighted laughter rippled through the guests. They were a captive audience, and she was their star performer. "Seriously, what's next? Is the kitchen staff going to start taking pictures?" Marcus did not flinch. His expression remained neutral, his posture steady. Inside, a cold fire was kindling, a familiar feeling he had learned to control, to channel. He was an observer, a collector of facts. And these were the facts. A bride, dripping in privilege, was tearing him down for sport. He kept his eyes on her, his gaze unwavering. This was not a personal attack. This was a data point. "Ma'am, I assure you my credentials are valid," he said, his voice still impossibly calm. His composure seemed to enrage her further. How dare he not crumble? How dare he stand before her, a nobody, and speak with such dignity? She wanted him to shrink, to apologize, to disappear. She took a step forward, her expensive gown rustling against the stone. "Security!" she shrieked, her voice now shrill and ugly. Two large men in black suits immediately moved toward her. "Get him out of here! Throw him out before he steals the silverware!" The insult hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. It was no longer about class. It was about race, a stereotype thrown like a rock in a glass house. A hush fell over the crowd. The smirks on some faces faltered. This had crossed a line from casual cruelty into something far more vile. Lena Ortiz, a young waitress balancing a tray of champagne flutes nearby, froze. Her heart pounded against her ribs. She saw the quiet dignity in the reporter's eyes, and the naked, unearned arrogance in the bride's. The injustice of it all made her stomach clench. It wasn't right. It was just ugly. One of the security guards, a burly man with a hardened face, reached for Marcus's arm. Marcus didn't resist. He simply lowered his camera, protecting it as the guard's thick fingers clamped down on his bicep. Tiffany wasn't done. She reached out and shoved his camera, not hard, but with a deliberate, dismissive push. That probably cost, what, $50? Get your cheap toys out of my wedding. The guard began to lead Marcus away through the sea of staring faces. The guests recorded every moment. The click and whir of their phones were the only sounds in the suddenly silent courtyard. Marcus walked with his head held high. He was being escorted out like a criminal, yet he looked more composed than anyone in that manicured garden. He was silent, but he was not broken. As he was pushed through the ornate iron gates, Tiffany turned back to her adoring audience, a triumphant smirk plastered on her face. She smoothed down her dress, the picture of a perfect bride once more. "Well, that's that," she announced to the crowd. "Some people just don't know their place." Her bridesmaids rushed to her side, cooing their support, telling her how brave she was, how she had protected the sanctity of her perfect day. The champagne began to flow again. The chatter resumed. The incident was over, or so she thought. Outside the gilded cage of the Lancaster estate, the heavy iron gates slammed shut behind Marcus. The sounds of the party, the music, the laughter, were instantly muffled, distant. He was alone on the quiet, tree-lined street. He took a deep, slow breath, releasing the tension that had coiled in his gut. His hands, which had been perfectly steady inside, now trembled slightly. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even rage. Not in its raw form. It was focus. It was the hum of a powerful engine preparing to engage. He pulled out his phone, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. He dialed a number he knew by heart. It rang once before a gruff, familiar voice answered. "Ray, it's me." Ray Thompson, the grizzled editor-in-chief of Hale News and Marcus's mentor for the better part of a decade, sounded immediately concerned. "Marcus, what's wrong? I thought you were at the Lancaster wedding. Did you get the shots?" Marcus leaned against the cool stone wall of the estate. "I got more than shots, Ray. I got the whole story." He recounted the events of the last 10 minutes, his voice a flat, emotionless monotone. He described Tiffany's words, the laughter of the crowd, the guard's hand on his arm, the shove. On the other end of the line, Ray's breathing grew heavier. He was a veteran journalist who had seen it all, but the casual cruelty of the story struck a nerve. "She called you a janitor and said you'd steal the silverware? They humiliated you on camera?" Ray's voice was a low growl, a promise of journalistic thunder to come. He was already picturing the headlines, the scathing op-eds. Marcus looked up at the sky, a sliver of blue visible between the oak trees. "Yes," he said. A faint, knowing smile touched his lips. "It was all on camera, dozens of them, probably already online. We'll sue them for defamation, for assault," Ray sputtered, his protective instincts kicking in. "We'll release a statement. I'll call Charles." "No," Marcus cut him off, his voice firm. "Don't do anything. Not yet." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "Good," he said, almost to himself. "Let them." Ray was confused. "Let them? Let them what? Get away with it?" "Let them think they got away with it," Marcus clarified. "Let them be arrogant. Let them post about it. Let them hang themselves with their own rope." Inside, the party had regained its momentum. Tiffany Lancaster was holding court near the champagne fountain, recounting her version of the story with dramatic flair. She was the hero of her own tale, the protector of decency and class. I told him he looked like a cleaning guy, she bragged to her fiancé, Daniel Pierce, and a circle of admirers. I mean, honestly, who shows up to a Lancaster wedding in a suit from a department store? It's just disrespectful. Daniel, a man whose spine seemed to be made of jelly, nodded along weakly. He looked uncomfortable, his eyes darting around as if he was worried someone might have been offended. But his desire to please Tiffany was stronger than any moral conviction. You did the right thing, Tiff. We can't have random people crashing our big day. People like that shouldn't be allowed at elite events, Tiffany declared, taking a triumphant sip of her champagne. Her bridesmaids giggled, nodding in fervent agreement. One of them pulled out her phone. I'm posting about this. Bride of the Year defends her wedding from a creep. Lena, the waitress, was clearing empty glasses from a nearby table when she overheard them. Her hands tightened on her tray, the crystal stems cool against her skin. Disgust washed over her, a bitter taste in her mouth. She looked at Tiffany, laughing and preening, and felt a profound sense of wrongness. The reporter had been nothing but polite. He had been doing his job, and he had been torn apart for their amusement. Outside, the security guard who had escorted Marcus out walked back to the gate. He unclipped Marcus's press badge from his belt and, with a flick of his wrist, tossed it onto the pavement. The plastic card skittered across the concrete, landing face up. The name, Marcus Hale, Hale News, was clearly visible. Whispers from guests who had come outside for a smoke floated on the evening air. I can't believe that guy. Did you see his shoes? Why would a real reporter look like that? Another said with a knowing sneer. He didn't even have a fancy camera. It was probably a knockoff. Tiffany, catching a glimpse of the scene from the courtyard, felt a surge of petty victory. She had faced a challenge to her perfect world and had vanquished it. She was powerful. She was untouchable. She was completely, utterly unaware that the footage of her tirade, captured from a dozen different angles, was already multiplying across the internet like a virus. Each share, each comment, each angry emoji was a nail being hammered into the coffin of her carefully constructed life. And she was the one holding the hammer. To understand the quiet, unshakable power Marcus Hale held, one had to go back 2 weeks. The setting was not a sun-drenched garden of earthly delights, but a sterile, imposing boardroom on the 50th floor of the Hale Media Group Tower in downtown Manhattan. The room was a study in minimalist power. A single massive table of dark, polished mahogany sat in the center, surrounded by sleek leather chairs. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, a concrete kingdom stretching to the horizon. This was the heart of a multi-billion-dollar news empire, and Marcus Hale was its heir apparent. He sat at the head of the table, not in his reporter's cheap suit, but in attire that fit the room. A perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit that spoke of quiet confidence. Across from him sat his father, Charles Hale, a titan of the industry. Charles was a man who had built Hale Media Group from a single local newspaper into a global behemoth. His presence filled the room. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, missed nothing. Around the table were the board members, powerful men and women who managed the vast arms of the Hale empire. Television networks, newspapers, websites, and magazines. The mood was celebratory. The quarterly reports were glowing. But that wasn't the main agenda. The vice chairman cleared his throat. Marcus, he began, his voice formal. As you know, your father is stepping down from his role as CEO at the end of the year. The board has voted unanimously. We would like to formally offer you the position, effective immediately. A murmur of assent went around the table. It was a foregone conclusion, a coronation. Marcus was brilliant, educated at the finest schools, and had been groomed for this role his entire life. He had a deep, intuitive understanding of the media landscape. He was the future. Marcus listened, his expression thoughtful. He looked at his father, who gave him a subtle, encouraging nod. Then he looked at the faces of the board members, people who had known him since he was a boy. "Thank you," Marcus said, his voice resonating with a quiet authority that belied his years. "I am honored by your faith in me." He paused, and every person in the room leaned forward. "But I must respectfully decline. For now." A stunned silence filled the boardroom. Charles Hale was the only one who didn't look surprised. He had known this was coming. One of the board members, a stern-looking woman named Eleanor Vance, finally spoke. "Decline? Marcus, this is your birthright. It's what we've all been working toward." "And I will accept it," Marcus assured them. "But not yet. I need 6 months." 6 months? To do what?" another member asked, bewildered. Marcus stood up and walked to the vast window, looking down at the city below. The cars were like tiny insects, the people indistinguishable specks. From up here, it was easy to forget them. It was easy to see the world as numbers on a spreadsheet, as ratings, as demographics. "I want to understand how our organization, how the media in general, treats people on the ground," he explained, turning back to face them. "Not the powerful people who get invited to our galas. I mean the ordinary people, the ones who are often the subjects of our stories, but never the authors. I want to know what it feels like to be on the other side of the camera, the other side of the microphone. I'm going to work as a junior reporter under an assumed name with a basic press pass. I want to see how people react to me when they don't know my last name is Hale." He looked directly at his father. Charles's expression was a mixture of pride and concern. He knew the world his son was about to step into. He had faced it himself decades ago as a young black man trying to break into a white-dominated industry. "The world will underestimate you the moment they see your skin, son," Charles said, his voice low and serious. "They will see a young black man in a cheap suit, and they will make 1,000 assumptions. They will dismiss you. They will disrespect you. It will be painful." He leaned forward, his eyes locking with Marcus's. "Use it. Learn from it. Let their ignorance be your shield and their arrogance be your classroom." Marcus nodded slowly. "I plan to," he said. And so the plan was set. He would be Marcus, the junior reporter from Hale News, sent to cover society fluff pieces, local fundraisers, and community events. He was given a basic equipment kit, a standard press pass, and a modest salary. Only his father and his mentor, Ray Thompson, knew the truth. To the rest of the world, and to the sprawling organization he would one day lead, he was a nobody. This was his true power. It wasn't the billions in his family's name or the CEO title waiting for him. It was the knowledge that he was invisible. He could walk into a room like the Lancaster wedding, and people would show him their true selves. They would peel back the layers of polished civility, because they believed he didn't matter. They would reveal the ugliness they kept hidden from their peers. The footage from Tiffany's wedding, captured on his small camera and on the phones of dozens of guests, was now more than just evidence of an insult. It was an asset. And it was the property of Hale News, which meant ultimately it was his. He didn't just have a story, he owned it. And he was about to decide exactly how that story would be told. Marcus's decision to walk among the unseen was not born from a whim or a desire for adventure. It was a legacy, a promise he had made to the memory of his mother, Evelyn Hale. Evelyn had been a brilliant, trailblazing journalist in the 1980s, a sharp-witted black woman who fought her way into newsrooms that saw her as a diversity hire at best, an intruder at worst. She had faced the same dismissive sneers as Marcus, the same quiet insults, the same assumption that she was out of her depth. He remembered one story she told him when he was a boy. She had been covering a political corruption trial, and a high-powered defense attorney had mistaken her for a court stenographer. "Coffee, black, 2 sugars, the man had ordered without even looking at her. Evelyn had simply smiled, gone and gotten the coffee and placed it on his table. "Here you go," she had said sweetly. An hour later, during a press scrum, she had cornered that same attorney with a question so insightful and incisive that it left him stammering, his arrogance shattered. Her story led the national news that night. "Power means nothing if you forget the powerless, Marcus," she had told him, her hand on his shoulder. "The view from the top is distorted. You see maps, not terrain. You see statistics, not people. If you ever want to lead, you must first learn to serve. If you ever want to be heard, you must first learn to listen to those who have no voice." Those words were the foundation of his character. He saw the immense power of the Hale media empire not as a prize to be won, but as a responsibility to be earned. He had to feel the sting of being underestimated, the burn of casual prejudice to truly understand the people his network reported on every day. He chose to be underestimated because he knew it was the only way to see the world without its mask. Back in the bustling, brightly lit newsroom of Hale News, Ray Thompson sat in his glass-walled office, staring at his computer screen. The raw footage from Marcus's camera was uploading to the network's secure internal server. It was shaky, the audio slightly muffled by the sounds of the party, but the content was crystal clear. Tiffany's sneering face, her cruel words, Marcus's calm demeanor, the guard's rough handling. It was all there. Ray's jaw was tight. Every protective instinct in him screamed to release the hounds. He wanted to write the most damning editorial of his career. He wanted to put Tiffany Lancaster's face on every screen in the country, branding her with the shame she so richly deserved. But he respected Marcus's strategy, patience. Let the story build on its own. Within hours, as the first guest-shot videos started to surface on social media, the footage on the Hale News server was flagged by a junior editor. He sent a message to his superior. "Got some viral potential content here. A bride at the Lancaster wedding going off on one of our reporters." The senior editor pulled up the clip. He watched it once, then twice. His eyes widened. This wasn't just gossip. This was a cultural moment waiting to happen. It was a perfect storm of class, race, and public shaming. He walked over to Ray's office. "Ray, you need to see this. Some bride named Tiffany Lancaster publicly humiliated one of our guys. The video is starting to pick up steam online. If we run our own footage, this thing will explode." Ray looked up from his screen, his face a mask of neutrality. He pretended to watch the clip for the first time, nodding gravely. "It's ugly, that's for sure." "Ugly is an understatement," the editor said, buzzing with excitement. "This is prime-time gold, a classic David and Goliath story. What do you want to do with it?" Ray leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. He glanced at his phone, where a single text message from Marcus had appeared a few minutes earlier. It contained only 2 words. "Let it." Ray looked at the eager editor. "Hold it for now," he said. "But keep it ready. I have a feeling we're going to need it." The editor nodded, slightly disappointed but understanding. He knew that when Ray Thompson played a story close to the chest, it was because he was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Marcus sat in his small, sparsely furnished apartment, a world away from the Hale family mansion. He scrolled through the initial wave of social media posts. The story was spreading, but it was still just noise, a tempest in a teacup. He knew it needed a catalyst, a human element to ground the outrage. He needed more than just a video of an arrogant bride. He needed a witness. Lena Ortiz couldn't shake the image of the reporter being dragged out of the wedding. It played on a loop in her mind. His quiet dignity, the bride's venomous words, the silent complicity of the wealthy guests. She was just a waitress, hired by a catering company for the night. She was nobody important, a ghost who moved through the party refilling glasses and clearing plates, meant to be invisible. Speaking up could cost her job, not just with this company, but with others. In her world, you didn't make waves. You kept your head down, collected your tip, and went home. But her conscience was screaming. Her grandmother had always told her, Silence in the face of evil is evil itself. What she had seen was more than just a rich woman being rude. It was an abuse of power, a casual display of cruelty that felt deeply, fundamentally wrong. During her designated 10-minute break, she huddled in a small, cramped staff room, the distant thumping of the wedding band's music, a dull ache in the walls. She pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking. She remembered seeing the reporter's press badge when he first introduced himself. She had seen the name clearly. Marcus Hale. With trembling fingers, she typed Marcus Hale News into a search engine. A staff profile popped up, a simple headshot with a generic work email address. Her heart hammered in her chest. This was a terrible idea. She should just forget it. It wasn't her fight. Then she thought of the way Tiffany had sneered, "Before he steals the silverware." The casual racism of it, the assumption that a black man was a potential thief, made her feel sick. She couldn't stay silent. She opened her email app. The blank screen stared back at her. What could she even say? Taking a deep breath, she began to type. Her words were simple, direct. "Mr. Hale, my name is Lena Ortiz. I was a waitress at the Lancaster wedding tonight. I saw everything that happened between you and the bride, Tiffany Lancaster. I heard everything she said. It was wrong, completely and utterly wrong. I just wanted you to know that not everyone there was laughing. Some of us saw the truth. I don't know if you are planning to do anything about it, but if you need a witness, someone to confirm your story, I'll do it. I saw everything, and I will testify if you need me to." She read the email over and over. It was a huge risk. What if he ignored it? What if he showed it to her boss? She could be fired on the spot. Her finger hovered over the send button for a full minute. She closed her eyes, took one more deep breath, and pressed it. The email vanished from her outbox with a soft whoosh. It was done. A wave of both terror and relief washed over her. She had done the right thing. Whatever happened next was out of her hands. Miles away, Marcus's phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email with the subject line, "Witness at the Lancaster wedding." He opened it and read Lena's words. A slow smile spread across his face. This was it. This was the spark. It wasn't a CEO or a celebrity or a politician. It was a waitress, a young woman with everything to lose and nothing to gain but her own integrity. She was the story's moral compass. He immediately typed a reply. "Ms. Ortiz, thank you. Thank you for your honesty and for your courage. It means more than you can possibly imagine. I may not need you to testify in a legal sense, but your willingness to speak up has already made a difference. Your courage will matter more than you think. Stay safe. Marcus Hale." Lena's phone vibrated a few minutes later. She saw the reply, and her breath hitched. She read his words, and a warmth spread through her chest, chasing away the fear. He had called her courageous. In that moment, she felt it. She felt like she had done something important. She had no idea just how important her small act of bravery would become. It was the first domino in a long line, and it had just been tipped over. Back at the Lancaster estate, the wedding reception was in full swing. The champagne had been replaced by cocktails, the polite classical music by a loud, pulsating dance beat. Tiffany Lancaster, basking in the glow of her perceived victory and several glasses of expensive bubbly, was the life of the party. She held court on the dance floor, her white dress a blur of motion as she laughed and spun. The incident with the reporter had become her favorite party trick, a story she embellished with each telling. "And then, you should have seen his face," she shouted over the music to a group of fawning guests. "I slapped his camera, just a little tap, and he just stood there like a deer in the headlights. He didn't even know what to do." The guests roared with laughter, feeding her ego. She felt powerful, witty, and completely justified. To her, Marcus wasn't a person. He was a punchline, a brief, amusing interruption to her perfect day. He was some broke beggar pretending to be press, she continued, her voice filled with theatrical disdain. He probably snuck in to try and get some free food. I did everyone a favor by getting him thrown out. Daniel, her fiancé, approached her, his smile looking a little strained. He had his phone in his hand. "Tiff, maybe you should tone it down a bit. People are posting videos of what happened earlier." Tiffany waved a dismissive hand, nearly spilling her drink. "Good, let them. Everyone should see how I handle riffraff. It's a lesson in maintaining standards." She snatched his phone from his hand and opened her own social media app. With a few quick taps, she uploaded a smug selfie of her and Daniel, the party raging behind them. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she typed a caption. "Having the most amazing wedding. So much fun. Had to have security drag out some janitor who crashed the party earlier. Know your class, people. # Lancaster. Wedding. # elite. # no peasants allowed." She hit post with a flourish. "There. Now everyone will know the real story." Daniel's face paled. "Tiff, no. You can't post that. The hashtags, the language. It's going to make things worse." "Worse? Don't be so dramatic, Danny," she scoffed, handing his phone back. "It's my wedding. I can post whatever I want. My followers will love it. They know I don't take nonsense from anyone." She was right about one thing. The post immediately started getting attention. Comments began piling up within seconds. But they weren't the messages of support and admiration she expected. The first few were from her loyal followers. "You go, girl, queen, and tell them, Tiff." But then the tide began to turn. "Know your class. The only person with no class here is you. I saw a video of what happened. You were a monster to that man. No peasants allowed. Wow, the 1800s called. They want their social attitudes back. That janitor was a reporter from Hale News, you idiot. You just assaulted a member of the press on camera." Tiffany's smile began to falter as she scrolled through the comments on her own phone. Her heart started to beat a little faster. Who were these people? Why were they attacking her? "They're just jealous haters," she muttered, more to convince herself than anyone else. "They're just nobodies who wish they could have a wedding like this." She refused to believe she had done anything wrong. In her mind, the world was a simple hierarchy. There were people like her at the top and people like Marcus at the bottom. She had simply been reminding him of his place. She couldn't comprehend that the world might not agree with her assessment. As she forced a smile and returned to the dance floor, her phone continued to buzz. Each notification a small tremor signaling the massive earthquake that was about to rupture the foundations of her privileged world. The digital fuse had been lit, and the explosion was imminent. She was just the last person to hear the countdown. The internet does not sleep. While Tiffany and her guests danced and drank the night away, the video of her confrontation with Marcus was multiplying in the digital darkness. It jumped from one social media feed to another, shared by night owls, international viewers, and algorithm-driven bots. It was picked up by small blogs, then larger ones. By the time the sun rose on the East Coast, the spark had become a wildfire. Tiffany woke up the next morning in her luxurious hotel suite, a dull champagne headache throbbing behind her eyes. She reached for her phone on the nightstand, expecting to see a flood of congratulatory messages about her wedding. Instead, she was met with a tsunami of hate. Her notifications were in the thousands. Her mentions were a relentless stream of fury. Her direct messages were filled with insults so vile they made her stomach churn. She clicked on a popular news aggregator, and her heart stopped. Her face was on the front page. The headlines were brutal, short, and designed for maximum impact. "Bride mocks black reporter, gets instantly humiliated by internet." "Society wedding turns ugly as racism caught on camera." "Know your class. Heiress Tiffany Lancaster's viral meltdown." She clicked on one of the articles. It contained an embedded video, a compilation of clips from a dozen different angles, edited together for maximum cringe. There she was, her voice shrill and ugly, calling Marcus a janitor, telling security to throw him out before he steals the silverware. Then it cut to a screenshot of her smug Instagram post. It was a perfect, damning portrait of entitled cruelty. Her hands started to shake. This wasn't supposed to happen. It was a minor incident. It was supposed to be a funny story. Daniel burst into the room, his face ashen. He was holding his own phone. "Tiff, have you seen this? It's everywhere. It's on every news site." "It's a nightmare," she whispered, scrolling frantically. The comments section of the articles were a war zone. Thousands of people were tearing her apart, calling her a racist, a monster, a Karenzilla. Her phone rang. It was the public relations manager for the high-end champagne brand that had sponsored her wedding. "Tiffany," the woman said, her voice ice-cold. "We are officially pulling our sponsorship and demanding the return of all promotional materials. A statement is being released to the press in 5 minutes, disavowing your behavior. Do not contact us again." She hung up. Before Tiffany could even process it, another call came in. It was the wedding planner. "Tiffany, the venue is being flooded with calls. They're getting death threats. They're canceling the second day of events. They're also considering legal action for damages to their reputation." Daniel looked like he was going to be sick. "My father called," he stammered. "His company's stock is taking a hit because of our association. He's furious, Tiff. He said this could ruin us." "Ruin us?" Tiffany scoffed, a hysterical edge to her voice. She was in denial, her mind refusing to accept the reality crashing down around her. "Don't be ridiculous. It's just a stupid video. It'll blow over. In a week, they'll be angry about something else." But it wasn't blowing over. It was escalating. The story had broken free from the confines of social media and was now being picked up by mainstream news outlets. The name Tiffany Lancaster was becoming synonymous with entitled bigotry. She had wanted her wedding to be the event of the season. And it was, just not for the reasons she had imagined. She had become famous overnight, but it was the kind of fame that destroys lives, the kind that follows you forever like a shadow. She thought it would all disappear, but the internet never forgets. While Tiffany Lancaster's world was catching fire, Marcus Hale was in his quiet apartment watching the flames with a calm, detached focus. He was not celebrating. He felt no joy in her public destruction. This was not about revenge. It was about consequence. It was a controlled burn, designed to clear out the rot of prejudice and entitlement. And he was the one holding the match. He had watched the story grow organically, fueled by public outrage. Now, it was time for Hale Media Group to step in, not just to report the story, but to define it. It was time to elevate it from a viral moment into a national conversation about class, race, and dignity. He made one phone call. It wasn't to his father or to Ray Thompson. It was to the secure private line of the Hale Media Group's board of directors. The chairman himself answered, his voice instantly alert. "Marcus." "It's time," Marcus said, his voice level and clear. There was no need for further explanation. They had a contingency plan for this moment. The Lancaster story. "I want you to greenlight a full feature, prime time. Pull out all the stops. I want our best investigative team on it. Focus on the culture of entitlement, the casual prejudice. Use our footage, and use Lena Ortiz's testimony. With her permission, of course." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. The chairman understood the implications. This wouldn't just be a news story. It would be a declaration of the network's values, and it would be the unofficial announcement of its new leadership's direction. "Consider it done," the chairman said. "The full resources of Hale News are at your disposal." Within hours, the machinery of the Hale media empire roared to life. A special report was scheduled for the following evening. Promos were cut and began airing across all Hale-owned channels. The title was simple and devastating. "The Wedding of Shame, Anatomy of an Outrage." Next, Marcus called his father. Charles Hale picked up on the first ring. "I saw the promos," Charles said, his voice a low rumble of pride. "You're taking control of the narrative." "It was time," Marcus replied simply. "Are you ready for them to know who you are?" his father asked. It was the crucial question. Once this story aired on his own network, his anonymity would be gone forever. He would no longer be Marcus, the underestimated reporter. He would be Marcus Hale, the heir to the throne, the man who had orchestrated the downfall of his own tormentor. Some would call it justice. Others would call it a calculated, brutal exercise of power. Marcus looked out his apartment window at the sprawling city. He thought of his mother, of her quiet strength. He thought of Lena Ortiz and her simple, powerful courage. He thought of the millions of people who felt unseen and unheard every single day. A faint smile touched his lips. "I'm not the one they need to be ready for," he said. "I think the world's ready to see who Tiffany Lancaster really is." The email arrived in Tiffany Lancaster's inbox like a formal summons from a king. The subject line was stark. "Request for clarification interview. Hale Media Group." Her heart, which had been in a state of constant, panicked fluttering for the past 24 hours, gave a hopeful leap. She read the email aloud to Daniel, who was pacing the hotel room like a caged animal. "Hale Media Group formally requests your presence for an interview to clarify the events that transpired at your wedding. We believe in fair and balanced reporting and wish to provide you with an opportunity to share your perspective on the incident that has now gone viral." Tiffany's face, which had been pale and tear-streaked, brightened. A flicker of her old arrogance returned. "See, I told you," she exclaimed, a triumphant note in her voice. "They know they're in the wrong. That reporter was their employee. They're probably terrified I'm going to sue them for harassment. This isn't a threat, it's an apology tour." She stood up, a new wave of confidence washing over her. "They'll apologize to me when I get there. I'll tell them how rude and unprofessional that reporter was, how he crashed my private event. I'll be gracious, of course. I might even say I'll consider forgiving them if they run a glowing 10-page spread on our wedding in their magazine." Daniel stopped pacing. A knot of anxiety was tightening in his stomach. Something about this felt wrong. It felt too easy. "Hale Media Group, Tiff," he said slowly, the name heavy in his mouth. "That's not some little blog. That's the biggest news network in the country. They're not afraid of anyone. This feels like a trap." "A trap? Don't be so paranoid," she snapped, already scrolling through her wardrobe, deciding what to wear. She needed to look powerful, elegant, and wronged. "This is our chance to fix everything, to tell our side of the story. Once people hear me, they'll understand. They'll see that I was the victim here." Her capacity for self-delusion was immense. She had constructed a reality in her mind where she was the wronged party, a brave bride defending her sacred space from an uncouth intruder. She clung to this narrative with the desperation of a drowning woman clinging to a piece of driftwood. She couldn't or wouldn't see the gaping holes in her own logic. Daniel tried again. "Maybe we should talk to a lawyer first, a PR specialist. We shouldn't just walk in there." "And look weak? Absolutely not," Tiffany declared, pulling out a crisp, white power suit. The irony was lost on her. "I'm not going to hide. I'm going to face them. I am a Lancaster. We don't run from a fight." She was blinded by an arrogance so profound that it warped her perception of reality. She believed her name, her money, and her social standing made her invincible. She saw the invitation from Hale Media Group not as a summons, but as a surrender. She was a queen being called to court to receive an apology from a groveling subject. And so, with her head held high and her heart full of righteous indignation, Tiffany Lancaster prepared to walk straight into the lion's den, utterly convinced it was a petting zoo. She had no idea that the lion was not only waiting for her, but that he was the one who had sent the invitation. The Hale Media Group skyscraper was a gleaming spear of glass and steel that pierced the Manhattan skyline. It was designed to intimidate, to broadcast power and influence from every angle. As Tiffany Lancaster and a reluctant Daniel Pierce stepped out of their town car and into the cavernous marble lobby, they were immediately dwarfed by its scale. A stern-faced woman with a clipboard and an earpiece met them. "Ms. Lancaster? Mr. Pierce? Right this way." Tiffany, still buoyed by her own self-importance, expected to be led to a small, comfortable office, perhaps for a quiet chat with a public relations manager. Instead, they were escorted into a high-speed elevator that shot upwards with unnerving silence. The doors opened on the 50th floor, the executive level. They were led down a long, silent corridor, their footsteps echoing on the polished stone floors. The walls were adorned with framed awards and iconic photographs from Hale News's storied history. At the end of the hall were two massive wooden doors. The woman pushed them open, revealing a room that took Tiffany's breath away. It was the main boardroom, the same room where Marcus had refused the CEO position just 2 weeks prior. It was vast, cold, and imposing. A single, enormous mahogany table dominated the space, surrounded by at least 20 empty chairs. At the far end of the room, several men and women in dark, severe business suits stood waiting. They were the top executives of Hale Media Group. Among them was Ray Thompson. And in the corner of the room, discreetly placed but impossible to miss, were two broadcast-quality television cameras, their red recording lights glowing like malevolent eyes. A chilling stillness fell over Tiffany. The confidence that had carried her all morning began to evaporate, replaced by a cold knot of dread. This was not a PR meeting. This was an interrogation. Ray Thompson stepped forward, his expression unreadable, his eyes cold. He did not offer to shake her hand. "Ms. Lancaster, Mr. Pierce, thank you for coming. I am Ray Thompson, editor-in-chief of Hale News." He gestured to a pair of chairs on one side of the vast table. They looked like seats for children at a giant's banquet. "Please have a seat. As our email stated, we are recording this interview for legal and editorial review." Tiffany and Daniel sat down, their movements stiff and awkward. The room felt immense, the executives like a panel of judges. Tiffany cleared her throat, trying to reclaim some semblance of control. She forced a smile, though it felt brittle on her lips. "Mr. Thompson," she began, her voice a little too loud in the silent room, "I'm glad we could do this. I'm here because one of your employees crashed my wedding and behaved in a very unprofessional manner. I think an apology from your network is in order." She waited for a reaction, for some sign of deference or concern. She got none. Ray Thompson looked at her, and for the first time a small, chilling smile touched his lips. It did not reach his eyes. "An employee, you say," he said, his voice soft but carrying across the cavernous room. He leaned forward slightly, placing his hands on the table. "Ms. Lancaster, we brought you here to correct a serious misunderstanding on your part." He paused, letting the silence hang in the air, thick with tension. "That employee you humiliated in front of your guests, the man you called a janitor," Ray said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "is not just an employee. He is the owner of this company." Tiffany's world stopped. The words didn't compute. Her mind reeled, trying to process the impossible statement. Owner? The man in the cheap suit? It was absurd. It was a joke. Before she could form a reply, the massive boardroom doors at the other end of the room swung open. A figure stepped through the doorway, silhouetted for a moment against the bright light of the hallway. He walked into the room with a calm, deliberate stride. He was no longer wearing the simple reporter's jacket and worn trousers. He was dressed in a bespoke, impeccably tailored navy suit that fit him like a second skin. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. He moved with an aura of quiet, unshakable authority, the kind that is born, not bought. It was Marcus Hale. Tiffany's jaw dropped. A small, strangled gasp escaped her lips. The color drained from her face, leaving behind a pasty, sickly white. Her perfectly applied makeup suddenly looked like a cheap mask. She stared at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and dawning, gut-wrenching horror. Daniel went completely pale. He looked as if he might faint. He sank back in his chair, his body going limp, all the fight gone out of him. Marcus walked to the head of the table, the seat that was rightfully his, and stood there, looking down at the two people who had dismissed him so cruelly less than 48 hours ago. He didn't look angry. He didn't look triumphant. He looked disappointed. The cameras in the corner swiveled silently to capture Tiffany's collapsing face. Marcus spoke, his voice calm and measured, yet every word landed with the force of a physical blow. "Ms. Lancaster," he said, his gaze pinning her to her seat, "you called me a janitor. You accused me of being a thief. You mocked me in front of hundreds of people and broadcast your contempt for the world to see." He let the accusation hang in the air. Tiffany's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Her mind was a whirlwind of confusion and terror. "And now," Marcus continued, his voice dropping slightly, making her lean in to hear, "you're sitting in my boardroom, in my building." Tiffany finally found her voice, but it was a pathetic, stammering whisper. You, you, you own this?" Marcus gave a single, slow nod. "My father, Charles Hale, built this empire from the ground up," he said. "And very soon, I will be leading it into the future." Silence. The only sound in the room was the faint electronic hum of the recording cameras. In that moment, Tiffany Lancaster understood. This wasn't an interview. It wasn't an apology. It was a reckoning. She had picked a fight with a nobody and had just discovered that he was, in fact, the king. Her entire world, built on a foundation of arrogance and inherited privilege, had just crumbled into dust beneath her feet. The consequences came swiftly, delivered with the cold, impersonal efficiency of a corporate execution. Marcus remained standing at the head of the table, a silent judge, while Ray Thompson laid out the verdict. Hale Media Group and its affiliates have extensive brand partnerships across the luxury market, Ray began, his voice flat and businesslike. He picked up a tablet from the table. "As of 9 a.m. this morning, we have officially invoked the moral turpitude clause in our contracts with any brand currently associated with you, Ms. Lancaster. We have pulled all scheduled media coverage, advertising, and promotional content related to your brand ambassadorships." He began to list them off, each name a dagger to Tiffany's social standing. "The Lavelle perfume campaign, the Argenti diamond collection, the Beaumont bridal couture line, all terminated, effective immediately." Tiffany felt the air leave her lungs. Those weren't just jobs, they were her identity. They were the source of her influence, the proof of her elite status. "Furthermore," Ray continued, not missing a beat, "we have informed all major event venues and charity organizations with whom we partner that any affiliation with you will be considered detrimental to their public image. I believe you'll find your invitations to the upcoming Autumn Gala and the Children's Foundation Ball have been rescinded." Daniel let out a low groan, burying his face in his hands. His family were patrons of the Children's Foundation. The public humiliation would be unbearable. "Your social media accounts," Ray said, looking at a message that had just appeared on his tablet, "are currently being frozen due to mass reporting for hate speech and bullying, in violation of community standards. They should be inaccessible within the hour. Fired, frozen, forgotten." In the space of 5 minutes, the entire architecture of her life had been dismantled. She was being erased. Then Marcus spoke again. His voice was softer now, directed not at Tiffany, but at an executive standing by the door. "Please, ask Ms. Ortiz to come in." The door opened and Lena Ortiz walked in. She was no longer in her simple waitress uniform. She was wearing a smart, professional dress, her hair neatly styled. She looked nervous but resolute. She walked past Tiffany and Daniel without a glance and stood beside Marcus. Marcus turned to her, and his entire demeanor changed. The cold authority was replaced by a genuine warmth. "Lena," he said, his voice kind, "you showed immense courage when it mattered most. You stood up for what was right when you had everything to lose. That is a quality that is rare and invaluable." He paused. "We could use people with your integrity at Hale Media Group. We are creating a new fellowship for aspiring journalists from underrepresented communities. It comes with a full scholarship to the Columbia School of Journalism and a paid position here at Hale News upon graduation. I would like to offer you the very first spot." Tears welled up in Lena's eyes. She was speechless. She could only nod, a profound, life-altering gratitude washing over her. Tiffany watched this exchange, her mind numb. The waitress she hadn't even noticed, the invisible girl clearing glasses, was now being elevated, honored, and given the kind of opportunity Tiffany had always taken for granted. The person she had mocked and humiliated was rising above her, lifted up by the very man she had tried to tear down. It was the final crushing blow. She had lost everything, and this girl, this nobody, had just been given the world. The days that followed were a blur of humiliation for Tiffany. The story of her disastrous boardroom meeting leaked, likely from a source inside Hale Media itself. The narrative was devastating. The arrogant bride, caught in her own trap, forced to confront the billionaire she had called a janitor. She became a national cautionary tale. The wedding, of course, was officially canceled. The second day of festivities never happened. The deposits were lost. The Lancaster and Pierce families, once set to be united in a powerful society merger, were now locked in bitter recriminations. Daniel, under immense pressure from his family to cut all ties, broke off the engagement. He did it via a short, cold text message. "I can't do this anymore, Tiff. The public damage is irreparable. My father says we're done. I'm sorry." He wasn't sorry for her. He was sorry for himself. He had hitched his wagon to a star, and that star had turned into a black hole, sucking his own reputation down with it. Once adored and envied, Tiffany was now a pariah. Paparazzi, the very people she used to court, swarmed outside her family's home, their cameras like weapons, their questions like accusations. "Tiffany, do you have a comment on the racism allegations? Is it true you've been dropped by all your sponsors? How does it feel to be the most hated bride in America?" She became a prisoner in her own mansion. The job offers that had once flooded her inbox vanished. The friends who had once clamored for her attention now screened her calls. In the world of high society, a scandal isn't just embarrassing, it's contagious. No one wanted to be associated with her toxicity. She would spend hours scrolling through the internet, torturing herself with the articles and comments. She saw pictures of Marcus Hale everywhere, now hailed as a visionary leader. She saw think pieces analyzing her own downfall, using her as an example of privilege poisoning and the arrogance of the elite. She had spent her entire life curating a perfect image, a brand built on beauty, wealth, and exclusivity. In less than a week, it had been utterly and completely destroyed. She hadn't just lost a wedding or a fiancé. She had lost herself. The person she thought she was, the powerful, untouchable Tiffany Lancaster, had been an illusion. And when that illusion was shattered, there was nothing left underneath but a hollow, bitter emptiness. While Tiffany's life imploded, Marcus Hale's began. The day after the boardroom confrontation, he formally accepted the CEO position at Hale Media Group. His first act was to call a company-wide town hall meeting, which was broadcast live across all Hale networks and streamed globally online. He walked onto the stage not with the swagger of a new king, but with the quiet humility of a servant leader. He wore a simple dark suit, a deliberate echo of the one he had worn to the Lancaster wedding. He stood at the podium and looked out at the thousands of employees gathered in the auditorium, and the millions watching from around the world. His speech was not about profits or market shares or 5-year plans. It was about principles. "For the past few weeks," he began, his voice steady and clear, "I have been working among you as a junior reporter. I did this because I believe you cannot lead an organization that tells the world's stories if you are disconnected from the world itself." He told them about his mother, Evelyn Hale, and her belief in the power of media to give voice to the voiceless. He spoke of the casual cruelties and the ingrained prejudices that so many people face every day, not in grand, dramatic moments, but in the quiet, dismissive interactions that grind down the human spirit. He never once mentioned Tiffany Lancaster by name. He didn't have to. The entire world knew the story. "Power," he said, his voice resonating with conviction, "is not measured by how loud you speak, but by how quietly you listen. It is not about the heights you can reach, but about the people you can lift up with you. True strength is not found in arrogance, but in humility. True influence is not about excluding people, but about including them." His speech was a sensation. The line, "Power is not how loud you speak, but how quietly you lift others," trended globally within the hour. It became the new mission statement for Hale Media Group, a promise to its audience that it would be a force for good, a champion of dignity, and an enemy of prejudice. Sitting in the front row of the auditorium was Lena Ortiz. She was no longer a waitress in a borrowed uniform. She was a journalist in training, a member of the Hale Media family. Marcus had become her personal mentor, guiding her, teaching her, and empowering her. He saw in her the same spark of integrity and courage that his mother had possessed. In lifting her up, he was honoring his mother's legacy. Marcus Hale was no longer the underestimated reporter. He was a new kind of leader, one who had walked in the shoes of the forgotten and had returned with a renewed purpose. He was building a media empire, not just on truth, but on empathy. His rise was not just a personal victory. It was a signal of change, a message to the world that the old guards of privilege and prejudice were on notice. A new era had begun. And so, the story comes to a close. It is a story of two paths that crossed for a brief, explosive moment, forever altering the course of two lives. The world often judges a person's worth by the surface, by the clothes they wear, the title they hold, or the color of their skin. It is an easy, lazy way to navigate a complex world, to sort people into boxes of important and unimportant. But arrogance is always a mask, a fragile shield hiding a deep-seated weakness. It is the loud, desperate cry of an insecure soul. Those who build their thrones on the humiliation of others will always find their foundations are made of sand. And those who laugh at the underestimated, who mock the quiet and dismiss the unseen, may one day find themselves bowing before the very people they tried to crush. Tiffany Lancaster disappeared into a self-imposed obscurity. Her name became a whisper, a cautionary tale told at cocktail parties about the dangers of hubris in the digital age. She lost her fortune, her fiancé, and her future, all for a moment of casual cruelty. She learned the hard way that when you build your identity on the opinion of others, you give them the power to destroy you. Marcus Hale, on the other hand, built a media empire rooted in justice and dignity. He never forgot the lessons he learned while wearing a cheap suit. He championed stories that mattered. He lifted up voices that had been silenced. And he led with a quiet strength that was more powerful than any boast or threat. He proved that true power isn't about the name you inherit, but the character you build. And the world never forgot the day a bride's perfect wedding was destroyed, not by a storm or a disaster, but by her own ugliness, reflected back at her for all to see. They never forgot the day a janitor turned out to be a billionaire boss, and the woman who mocked him lost everything, learning the final unbreakable rule of life. Character is destiny. If this story about dignity and justice moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one. What would you have done in this situation? Let us know below.